Hello everybody, this is Dr. Mike Taylor here at the University of Mary, and we're just off of campus right at the Annunciation Monastery, and the sisters have shared this beautiful prayer space with us called the Labyrinth. And what I wanted to do today with Megan's help, she's been gracious enough to help record this, is share this with you. Typically, I'm here with students in the fall, in the summer, and in the spring walking it. It could be undergraduate students, graduate students, doctoral students. And because of the times we're in right now, this is about the best way I can share it with at least everybody because of the virus situation. But I wanted to bring it to your attention for a couple reasons. One is it's just a great prayer space, and it's Christian in its recent origins. And prior to that, it has more ancient origins. So it's a great place to be outside if you're a person who really embraces God and all God's spirituality and really enjoys to be outside in nature. This is a really good intentional way to have that prayer space. But as an educator, I think it's a wonderful metaphor too for curriculum. And in some places I've talked to you a little bit about Carreri. Well, this is the Labyrinth, I think, is another great metaphor too for curriculum development and reconceptualizing curriculum, because the path's not straight. It's a spiral and a circle together. So I think any of you that have been involved in planning any type of approach to learning, we all realize that as straight as we want to make it to the point, to the piece of knowledge, to the exam, to the test, it doesn't always seem to work that way. So I think this is a really good symbol for that as we walk it. So what we're going to do today is, I think I'll just start with just a couple more points about what this particular labyrinth is and where we're at here at the University of Mary and by Annunciation Monastery. And then at some point in time along the way, we'll stop and I'll share with you a couple more things that I think are really interesting about not only this labyrinth, but labyrinths all over the world. And then when we get to the center, which is the most spiritual heart of the labyrinth, I'll talk about that. Then we'll come out and I'll just say a few things to kind of wrap it up. So just a couple quick points about this labyrinth. This labyrinth has been around since May 29th, 2004, 10 o'clock in the morning. The sisters dedicated this. So rocks were brought in. Initially, these were all North Dakota fieldstone, right out of the farm fields. Farmers brought these here, as they did for a lot of the construction here at the University of Mary when you see the brick facade and those type of things. So now the rocks have had kind of broadened out from all over the United States and even some internationally. So we did that as well. We left a couple of our rocks here. And typically if you're here at the Labyrinth, leave the rocks on the benches. And the sisters will place them because they have particular places to put them. So it's been around for a number of years, about 16 years. So it's an ancient and sacred prayer path. I kind of mentioned that. Typically the sisters are most comfortable when people are here between 8 and 9 p.m. So it's open for quite a long time to have that spiritual journey. And it's a good time to just reflect as you kind of walk through. The kind of rock that's here, if you're a geology person or a science type of person, you might want to know that the sisters have here down, there's petrified wood that's like prehistoric in nature, which is really interesting. You'll see those. Some of the reddish color are the petrified wood. There's coal, there's scoria, and there's also granite, among others. So and all these rocks, of course, are donated, and some have some really interesting fossil formations in them too. So, okay, well, one of the things about entering the labyrinth is to try to enter into it with as prayerful mind as one can have, as busy as our minds all are. And it's really a good opportunity to kind of leave all that behind, enter this sacred space, and really get focused in what's present, and trying to get as much in contact with God as possible. So we'll go into the labyrinth for a while and you'll get an idea of how it is spiral in nature but also circular at the same time. And then we'll take a break and I'll talk a little bit more, and then we'll go to the middle and talk, and then one more time on the way out. Well, we're a little over halfway of the journey. I got super close to going inside, and then outside I went. So the spiral and the circle was definitely playing with my mind as a little bit. But I think one of the things you'll find too when you experience Labyrinth is while you're trying to predict where it's going to go, eventually you kind of give up on that and just let the path dictate more where you're going. I just wanted to draw attention real quick to, it's going to be hard to see, but there's a, of course, North Dakota is replete with buttes, really beautiful hills that have distinctive features. One way out there that sticks up larger than any other is called Little Heart Butte, or some say Three Buttes, or if you were at Fort Lincoln, they'd call it Medicine Butte. Anyways, it's a very prayerful place for Native American, namely Lakota people, but others who have ascended that peak and prayed at that very place. Down from that butte, coming closer to the Missouri River, is the Little Heart Creek and Valley. And in that valley is where Lakota people say that white buffalo calf woman appeared. And it's a very sacred area. She came to them in a time of drought and no buffalo anywhere. People were starving, people were really struggling, and she appeared and really asked them to kind of mend their ways, to pray, to fast, and then she said she would be back 4 days later. She came back later with the sacred pipe and other artifacts, and really kind of corrected the spiritual life of Native people. So really sacred story and beautiful area, as we're just kind of in this area overall. So as we were walking, I was thinking about this story in France, which is amazing. I just kind of did some research on it. It's at what they call the Chartres Cathedral, and this is in 1220 AD in France, and Christian pilgrims would walk 20 to 30 miles. So as I'm walking this, I know I'm not walking 20 to 30 miles, but from their home, and they would end up at this cathedral where they could come and not only worship at the cathedral, but also there would be a labyrinth carved into the cathedral floor. So people would come, see that, walk that, pray there. Bishop Robert Barron, who I know is very popular with a lot of people inside and outside of the Catholic Church, he went there and just observed some of the stained glass windows and other structures that resemble a labyrinth. He even equated it to like Mary's womb and the way some of it was shaped and formed. So it's a very holy place. One more point about labyrinths is they've been around for about 5,000 years, long before Christianity. So Christianity, like in a lot of ways, has adopted certain things from prior to its history. So it's a pre-Christian symbol, but it's also been converted for Christianity's use. So just all kinds of different ways in which this has symbolized different ways to spirituality. And in this context, it's Christian, but we're also kind of thinking about it as a curricular metaphor too, and how that planning can go perfect at times or take different turns and twists. And then when we get to the heart of it, we'll talk a little bit more about the labyrinth here near the Annunciation Monastery and right off the campus of University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota. Now we're at the center of the labyrinth, and really the center symbolizes kind of reaching God and coming to that sacred center of the labyrinth. Often it's marked by a tree. Sometimes it's marked with another symbol, a rose, or another type of symbol that would be associated with Christianity, with life. This tree has a really interesting story that the sisters would tell if they're here today. This tree was obviously not this big when it started off 16-ish years ago. It was really small, and the sisters had a real challenge because deer were trying to eat it. And so the sisters would tell you that they struggled with that, and of course they would never harm a deer or any other wildlife. They're just that in tune with God's creation. So they had to figure out all different kinds of ways to surround it, to protect it, and it did survive. So it's kind of an interesting story among a lot of other stories that the sisters share. Some of the sisters that helped design this went and consulted all over the United States about labyrinths. So some churches would construct outdoor labyrinths like this. Some would put in carpeting that had the shape of a labyrinth in their church where people could walk it, in Catholic churches and other Christian churches. So it's just really interesting the impact our sisters here at Annunciation Monastery have had. One of the things I wanted to share is sometimes labyrinth and maze are used synonymously, and I know the literature and other sources are like they're not the same. Just because a labyrinth has the circular yet spiral construction, and a maze is a little bit more intentional in its path. And I also know, as far as Native American spirituality goes, maze is taken differently too. Not the corn kind of maze, but in the maze that they talk about, this symbol of life, the man in the maze. So they talk about a person's path in the journey and the different twists and turns that that can take. And this goes back to kind of ancient roots of Native American spirituality in a lot of ways. So all kinds of different roots in it. A couple other things that I wanted to share is there's 3 really interesting terms that go along with the labyrinth, and it's almost like a process that everybody can go through. And I say can because I don't think there should be an expectation or an assumption that someone's going to have some kind of transcendental experience while they're in the labyrinth. That would be, I think, just assuming way too much for what its intention is. But there's 3 terms: purgation, illumination, and union. So purgation doesn't sound too inviting, does it? But it really means releasing, and not releasing like if you're sick, but just releasing, well, kind of like if you're sick, just releasing all those things that you're thinking about, that are occupying your mind, that maybe are causing you to be a little anxious. We all know anxiety is a big thing nowadays. The intention is of the labyrinth is for you to give you the opportunity to just release all that as you enter into this. Illumination means kind of receiving. So this means at the center this is probably the most sacred and prayerful spot of the labyrinth, where you can just kind of come, reflect, gather your thoughts, and start to think about where you're at in relation to God. If you're thinking in an educational context, which could branch that spirituality, where are you in the construction of this learning, with other people and involved in that. And the last thing is union, which means returning, which we're about ready to do. And this means to leave the center, follow the same path back out. There can be a strange sense of strengthening and clarity. You become more empowered, defined, and to do the work you feel your soul calling for. So we probably all had different experiences where we've really done some type of meditative, prayerful endeavor and felt kind of refreshed, renewed. That could be combined with exercise. That's why I think the labyrinth is such a nice prayer tool.